Good afternoon, everyone. This is an exciting panel. Several people, Rajat mentioned 10 years of internet. Deep was mentioning this conference started 11 years back. But what we mean by the internet has been changing every 5 years. So I remember that when we did our first business on the internet, it was still looking like a very much pipeline of business, right? We would generate a certain number of leads and then want to close them by the end of the day, end of the week, end of the month. And then in 2015-16, this whole narrative shifted from just being an internet business to being what is called a platform business. And sure enough, there was a lot of content and framework to that, but that became the new buzzword. And over the last 2 or 3 years, the platform business is now giving way to what are called ecosystem businesses. Again, I'm sure most of you have heard about those kind of businesses. And many more of us have used that term without necessarily fully appreciating what that business model means and what that can bring to each of our companies. So our next speaker, Rajiv, is a senior partner at Boston Consulting Group. He leads their TMT practice, has over 25 years of consulting experience in multiple geographies. And he'll take us through an exciting narrative on what these ecosystem businesses are and why all of us as entrepreneurs should start to think about ecosystems when we think about our businesses. Rajiv, welcome on stage.
Thank you, Alok. Thanks.
Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Alok talked about 2 things. One is I spent 25 years in consulting. I don't know if that was meant to be a positive way of introducing or saying I'm good for nothing to do something else. The other thing he said, he used the word buzzwords a few times. Now, 25 years in consulting has meant that I've seen an array of buzzwords. When I started, BPR was the buzzword, then Y2K, the .NET boom and crash. Then came the mother of all buzzwords, transformation and change management. The good thing is the last 8 or 9 years, if not more, has seen digital, internet, technology, and given my own background of being a technologist for the last 25 or 26 years, there's never been a better time to have that kind of a profile. Digital itself lent to many, many such terms. Platform and ecosystems being 2 close cousins to each other. Interestingly, in the last few years, the word ecosystem has been used on an average 1.5 times across all company filings across US, China, India, and so on. And it has seen a 36x growth, just the use of the word. Now, this is quite interesting, but let me, before trying to demystify this term, have a little quiz question for you. The close cousin of the word ecosystem is platform. Any idea where the first time platform play really originated? Any thoughts from the audience? When was the first time somebody used platform as a play, as a business model? Any guesses? Railways, okay, railways is one example. That's a good correlation. Any other ideas? Sabzi Mandi. Anyone from the back? I'm sure I can hear you. Apple. Not like the Sabzi Mandi apple, but yeah. So, let me give you a clue. It's not as recent as that. It's 1886. It started with watches. It ended with hedge fund managers. And this platform play really reshaped a nation. Any ideas? Sorry? No, not quite. So look, as we talk about ecosystems, we'll realize it's always been on the back of the convergence of a few things, few happenings coming together. There are a couple of things that were happening in the Americas, in USA, around the late 1800s. One was advent of railroads, and the other was the postal system. So the way the story goes is There was this little town in Minnesota, and a watch manufacturer in Chicago had transported a crate of watches for a jeweler in Minnesota. The jeweler, for some reason, refused to take possession of that, and so this crate sat on this railroad. There was a 23-year-old boy who was a telegraphic guy, so he knew how to communicate through telegraphic thing. He was a telegraphic clerk. He realized this crate is there, and he took that crate from this Chicago watch manufacturer. Each watch used to be manufactured for $12, and in the retail market, it used to sell for $24. This 23-year-old boy took that and sold it for $14. Now, the other phenomenon that was happening around the same time was that US had no time zone, so every city had its own time. And this is the period when the railways had introduced 4 time zones, and everybody needed a watch just to align if they were going to commute by trains. So he sold these watches, made a profit of $5,000, which in today's terms would be around $140,000, and started his own company. A few days later, he published a catalog of 52 pages of watches. Within 10 years, that catalog had become 1,200 pages, and 1% of US GDP in the year 1918 was traded through this catalog. 1% of the entire country's GDP was traded through this catalog. Any ideas who this 23-year-old boy was? It was Robert William, and you'll be more familiar with the surname, Sears. So Sears is the first known platform play. Fast forward 132 years. 132 years later, something happened. Sears went bankrupt. This company that had 1% of US's GDP going through it went bankrupt because somebody else came and had the same platform play, but with cheaper labor, cheaper warehouses, and cheaper inventory, managed to sell products, more products at lower prices than Sears. And that company was Walmart. In 1980, Sears was 5 times the size of Walmart. In 1990, Walmart was 2 times the size of Sears. 2018, Sears declared bankruptcy. What Walmart did is used data to communicate to headquarters buying behaviors so that every store could buy goods at bulk and reduce its inventory cost, reduce its storage cost, and sell cheaper than Sears. The story does not finish there. It took 132 years for Walmart to disrupt Sears. It took 20 years for the mother of all platforms to disrupt and make 6,700 retailers in the US go bankrupt. And surely we know the name of that. Amazon, the A to Z store. So what started as a convergence of railways and postal systems has converged into a convergence of technology and data, and who can use that better. And this shows the kind of disruption that has happened. I could create a similar table. I'm a consultant, I'm used to creating tables, so that's fine, don't judge me. But you could do the same table for healthcare. You could do the same table for financial services and banks, for metals and mining, for any industry. Yes, the truth is all industries are on some S-curve. Maybe retail, telco, media are towards the higher end of the S-curve, and maybe mining and oil and gas are at the lower end of the S-curve, but it is finally an S-curve. If you look today at the top 10 valued companies in the world, 7 of them are an ecosystem. The only 3 companies here that are purportedly not an out-and-out ecosystem play are Aramco, Berkshire, and arguably, and I use the word arguably carefully, Tesla, because they do most of the things in-house and don't use third-party players. But if there's one conclusion of the story, it is that ecosystems tend to be valuable, tend to create a lot of value on the back of convergence of a few plays, typically technology and data, but also commercial models. So if you have to ask, what is the definition of an ecosystem? I mean, I could use some definition like this, And for, I think all of you here, maybe, or at least most of you with an Indian background and therefore probably have seen Three Idiots, it will feel like Chatur trying to describe a machine. Or, at least I could try, I mean, no skills close to that, but try to be a Funsuk Wangdu and say, look, anything is an ecosystem or can be an ecosystem. You could have an ecosystem in a company that's a tech first. You could have an ecosystem in a very traditional company. You could have an ecosystem in an industry that is quote unquote smart. Smart homes, smart devices, smart cars. You could have an ecosystem in an industry that is very traditional. Auto, metals, mining. As a proud Indian, I would like to believe you can have an ecosystem emerging in the Bay Area, or for that matter, even China. But I'm going to talk to you some examples of brilliant ecosystems happening in India. And finally, each of us in this room, with a mindset of technology, of that being of an entrepreneur founder, can find a role to play in the ecosystem. You don't necessarily need to be the orchestrator. You can be a partner, you can be a contributor. There are different roles along a continuum, and you can have a role anywhere in that. Let me quickly take some examples to bring this to life. So first of all, various examples. I mean, Google's an ecosystem, Baidu is an ecosystem. We all know about this. Google started as a search engine. 2008, I personally was amazed and astonished when Google Chrome was launched actually on Microsoft. You know, sworn enemies coming together to work on a platform that would solve browser issues on an operating system that was at that point in time the leader and continues to be. The most exciting thing about Google actually is with Android. There's a Google ecosystem and in uppercase that they've done with Android, which has multiple use cases. But just take as an example, if you have an Android phone and you're on this Google ecosystem, you can use the phone as your key to your home. That is powered by Google Smart Homes. Baidu started as everything video. But today, Baidu has over 200,000 doctors as a platform play. It has over 170 different industries or sectors on Baidu as a platform. So obviously, there are these tech-first players who have developed themselves well as an ecosystem. Many of you might think, okay, yeah, but we are not a Google, we are not a Baidu. Doesn't matter. If you take examples out here, you know, as you look across the continuum, you have various examples of Mahindra & Mahindra. As they produce their intelligent car, their in-house or their intelligence system is an ecosystem of 600 different players and platforms coming together. The best example that I have read recently and seen some of it is something in the auto industry. So aerial ride sharing. If you thought Uber disrupted the auto industry, then the next big disruption is aerial ride sharing. Now there are various things that are converging to effectively having a back to the future kind of thing. You know, you're in the air and you're in a cab. You have technologies such as electronic vertical takeoff and landing and distribution electric propulsion, DEP. You have things like 3D printing, computer-aided design, material sciences on carbon fiber. A General Motors or a Toyota, or for that matter, even a Tesla can't bring all of this together. So you have players like Toyota, General Motors working with Google, working with FAA, working with Uber, working with NASA, with Airbus and Embraer. And there's almost $30 billion of investment that's going into this space of aerial ride sharing to disrupt the auto industry, which is likely to be a reality, at least in terms of pilot, within the next 5 years. So it's not a 2050 vision, it's a 2026 vision. If you look even at industries, you know, smart homes, many of us have various little gadgets at home, you know, whether it's a little vacuum cleaner and the the i360 from Dyson is a good example, Samsung is a good example. But Alexa, how many of us use Alexa or something similar to that? All right, I see a splattering of hands. When I first bought my Alexa, it was very cute. I used to say, Alexa, play this song. Alexa, how's the weather outside? And then I got bored. That is because till 3 years back, Alexa could understand 270 commands. As of 1st Jan 2022, Alexa can understand 100,000 commands. So Alexa can understand, I have a little pet dog. Alexa can give me advice about the nutrition of my pet dog. Alexa is tied up with Mayo Clinic to give advice on diet and nutrition. So again, these are examples of industries that hinge on ecosystems. My first summer internship back in 1996 was in a mining company. And I had to take this elevator and go in one of these underground mines. I felt very claustrophobic and felt very scared. I quickly decided I want to do technology, which wasn't in vogue back in 1996 because just doing BPR in mining was something I said, shit, ye to just na ho payega. I again visited a mine in 2019 in Australia. And I sat in a plush office in Sydney in a remote operations center managing excavation in a mine that was 200 miles away. A lot of things have come together to make that possible. But one example is Cisco, which has partnered with OEMs, various other SIs, and various elements to bring together a Cisco mining solution that is quote unquote smart mining, allows people to sit and work from comfortable cities and have machines do a lot of the work that if any of you are Amitabh Bachchan fans would relate Kala Patthar to. So that's mining. I mean, mining is not an industry you associate with digital and tech and ecosystems and platforms. So I was looking for an example that's like really at the other end of the S-curve. My third example, which is coming to India. So we're all very familiar with these examples happening in Australia and the Bay Area and China. And so as a proud Indian, it is great. It's great to see the transition. Alok talked about, this chapter starting 10 or 11 years back, the role of India Internet Day and so on. And as an Indian, I must confess, I'm very, very proud of the fact that we are not only fast followers now, we are actually entrepreneurs, we are actually innovating. And the innovation is happening, a lot of that in this room, and similar rooms like this in various cities, and in various companies and industries. Take a traditional company like Mahindra & Mahindra, which I took an example of, or take a more recent company like Moglix. 140,000 suppliers across 40 interfaces on a platform that is actually changing the logistics and distribution industry. So the final example I want to take is that of your role. Each and every individual entrepreneur in this room can decide, based on your product and solution, based on the sector and the adjacencies you work on, where could you fit? Could you be a quote-unquote traditional product? And I would urge you to think beyond that. Or could you be part of a digitizer network? Could you be part of a platform? Or could you be part of a super platform? Actually, all of those answers are very, very, very accretive. And as you play that role, you yourself can be a contributor, a partner, or an orchestrator. It is a fallacy to think that you have to be a Jio or a Paytm or a Tata Neu. No, you can play different roles and still benefit hugely for yourself, your customers, and your employees through being part of this play. So I'll converge by saying that ecosystems are financially accretive. They help solve problems that are otherwise not solvable alone. And there's a way to think about your role in this. This is not the custodian of only the Amazons and the Paytms and so on, but everyone has a role to play in that. And as you look at that, it's a nice frame, and I'm not going to dwell into the details of it, but there are 6 questions for you to think about as you structurally think, what is your role and place under the sun called an ecosystem? I'm just going to finish with a short clip, if it decides to play. No, sorry. Can we go back one page and try to press play out there? No, leave it. It's fine. The audio isn't working. So that's me and Alok hand it over to you and the audience for any questions, but hopefully that was somewhat useful in a 20-minute quick spiel.
Hey, thanks, Rajiv. Thank you. Fascinating stuff. What I really fear is tomorrow morning onwards, every entrepreneur pitch is going to mention ecosystems in there. So please take a seat.
Sure.
And what I want to get a little bit of flavor from you is also to understand, are there specific industries? What are the criteria for something to be thought of as an ecosystem and not just plain vanilla good business?
So it's good if everyone starts thinking about ecosystems. That 36x that I showed initially will only go up, but hopefully it won't be a buzzword. I would urge everyone to think about it. Everyone, I think, or at least 90-95% of the players will have a role to play. The industry you are in has a correlation. So there are 2 or 3 things I would say. First of all, the industry. There are different industries. I would say media, retail are at one end of the spectrum. There are 52 sectors that we track. And we track these 52 sectors into 4 categories, from being the leaders to being more of the laggards as a sector. So we see media and retail being at one end. We see banks and telco kind of catching up there. And we see oil and gas and mining, let's say, at some of the other extreme. So the sector you are in starts defining a bit of your role. Having said that, you also need to decide, are you going to be the innovator or are you going to be the fast follower? If you're going to be an innovator, then if you're in one of the sectors that is at the lower end of the S-curve, you have more to think about. If you are part of media, retail, financial institutions, and so on, then chances are that whatever you're trying to do has been done somewhere. And the best thing to do is try to at least figure out, can you be a fast follower? The third thing to think about is, what is your role? Are you the orchestrator? Are you the contributor? As a consultant, as somebody leading digital for BCG for the last few years, I've had players come in and talk to me about saying, okay, we want to be part of the BCG ecosystem. And those number of requests are extremely high. So how do you create a mental frame to quickly assess the desirability, feasibility, and viability of a player in that ecosystem starts becoming critical. You really don't have the time and investment to evaluate everything.
As you described these 3 roles, right, that of a contributor, partner, orchestrator, my first instinct was almost to look at this as a hierarchy, right? Why would I be a contributor? I should want to be the orchestrator. But then when I looked at the logos in each of those, it seems like there's a lot of value that is being created, not necessarily in a pyramidal format, but you could be a contributor and still be very valuable. How should entrepreneurs in their early stage journey start to think about where do they belong?
You hit the nail on the head. And one of the things I think both you and I would have learned just given our respective ages is to develop a thick skin and not have egos in terms of where you sit. The best example of contributor versus orchestrator, and the audience called it out when I talked about the disruption retail, is Amazon. Amazon is an orchestrator and is loss-making. Amazon Web Services is the best example of a contributor and is the most profit-making. Now go and talk to Amazon, who has the bigger ego out there. So this title of where you sit in that continuum is misleading. I think what we do and how we contribute to that can be an exceptionally important thing. And there'll be many, many such examples. I mean, as you were asking the question, I could think of almost in every sector an example of the same player, possibly, and a large player, being a contributor versus being an orchestrator themselves. So the role you play keeps changing.
Well, this is a discussion that I could go on for many more, hours, I would say. But thanks so much for giving us this peek into the, ecosystem thinking that you guys have developed. I'm sure you will find some of the entrepreneurs reaching out to you one-on-one, outside this hall. Thanks so much, Rajiv. Appreciate your.
Thank you, Alok. Thanks, everyone.
Can you please just, Rajiv?
Oh, sorry. Holy cow, that looks too heavy.
Thank you for the session. Alok, can you present the... Thank you. Thank you, Alok. Thank you.